Okay, here we go. Hey, Pindar.
Hey, good morning. Well, I guess you're in London, so good evening.
Good morning and good afternoon, both. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Awesome. It's super to host you, to have you, like to have a conversation with you. As I've mentioned before, I've been obviously like looking from afar to everything that you're doing. So it's really awesome to have the chance to speak to you.
Oh, thanks. It's same. It's kind of, it's always weird. I've been watching so much of your work and your shows. It's like to be actually talking to you is really fun and interesting. So likewise.
Great. Well, I just wanted to maybe, start as usually kind of like go a bit back in history and kind of start from asking, how you got into this space. Like you're really, you've been really early with everything. So I'd love to know how it all started for you, how you make that transition, um, and go from there.
Yeah, it's luck. Like I always feel for when people are trying to get into super rare now, because for me it was pure luck. I was just looking at some AI art and I wanted to buy AI art, and I've been an AI artist for a long time. So whenever I saw new AI art, I'd get in touch with the artist and was like, "Hey, want to trade art? Buy art?" And I saw Robbie Barrett's work, and I got in touch with Robbie, and I saw it was on Super Rare, and then I was like, "Wow, this is interesting." And then I was like, "Ah, this must be hard to get in here, though." So and I was really impressed with the artists on Super Rare. I think it was very early though, like only a handful of artists: X Copy, Hackatow, Robbie, and then an interesting thing happened. I just decided I'll apply, but I didn't have much. I didn't think I would get in, and then I got in, and then all of a sudden all of a sudden I didn't think of them that highly anymore. I was like, they'll just let anyone in. But back then they were begging people to come in. It was like I think I was the 12th artist, and then they
Wow.
and I told them, I was like, look, I don't really make digital work. I have a robot that paints, and we make paintings, and it's not going to be a one of one because I'll have the painting. And then I made this weird agreement with John that I would destroy the paintings after I took a picture of them. So I, and, and I did that for a couple of them, and then I was like, it's too much work to destroy these paintings. And so I don't know what my first token number is, but it was early. It was early in 2018, and that's just been regularly doing stuff on there since then. Yeah, and following the other artists. It was it was a really fun time back then. Continues to be, but back then was interesting because I think the only people noticing our art were the other artists. That was it.
Yeah.
I don't think until Roses, which is of course his amazing art series. I don't think he was the first non-fellow artist to buy my art, and then shortly after he became an artist.
And when you say, back then, like you were kind of like trading
Yeah.
AI, like you were looking for AI artists and like trading, like what did that look like? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was fun. It's like so I got started with robotic art back in 2005, like 15 years ago, and the internet, of course, was big, but it wasn't like it is today. It was really hard to find people and things. Everyone did not have a website or was Google searchable, so I was just constantly searching for other people making art with robots. I just thought it was interesting. And when I found them, I would cold call them. I'd do everything I could to find their contact information. I'd cold call them and just, I don't know, just look for a friend. Um, Trade advice, figure out, what's going on. One of my favorites was I got in touch with Harold Cohen, who's behind Aaron. He's a legend in the AI art world space, and it struck off like these regular conversations where we just talked about what AI was and whether or not AI could imagine art or faces. And I would say he's probably the most formative figure in my art career, just because I spoke with him so often. And he would get really angry at a lot of the claims. One thing here's biggest influence from Harold Cohen on me is a lot of people, and this is artists are very careful not to do this, but a lot of people ascribe more to AI than the AI can do to get headlines. They'll be like, this AI made this painting, or this AI is the first AI
Mm.
to write a poem, and of course or this is the first AI artist, and of course that's not true because you're not an artist until you're a person, and you're sharing some of your own experience with the world. So an AI won't be an artist until it's sharing an experience, and all these claims are bogus. So Harold Cohen taught me uh, to carefully never even misrepresent or make those kinds of claims. And that's why everyone that knows me and my art, it's like collaboration. I do go as far, and this is where I used to argue with him a lot. I do go as far as saying that the robots are creative. They're not making art, but I definitely think they're being creative, and that's one of the best things that came from the early days. And there were other ones. There's like PumaBot. There was PollockBot. There's all these people just experimenting, and back then everyone was so friendly. It was just a fun time. Patrick Doucette, someone I got in touch with early. He continues to make amazing painting robots. Him and I love portraiture. Yeah, it's funny. I would say back then I knew maybe 4 or 5 other people, including Patrick Doucette and Harold Cohen. Now there's thousands, and I think that's really cool. I mean, like, there's thousands and thousands and thousands. It's been fun to watch all that happen.
And I guess my question is, so you invented like Cloud Painter, first of all.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's talk about that. Like, how did that happen? And let's go a little bit in deeper into this.
Okay. The Cloud Painter is sort of the name is interesting. I just think it sounds good. But there's more to it than that. It's like back then, cloud was the big buzzword, but it wasn't about that either. It was about like, it actually goes back to Harold Cohen again. Harold Cohen used to get really angry when he said that when he was a grumpy person. If everyone knows him for being grumpy, it's interesting, but brilliant. And he would always claim, he made this one claim that people are either working from photos with their AI art or they're lying about it. And so I had this idea. I was like, what if I could point my robot at the sky, and it takes for inspiration, it took what it sees in the clouds, and then would take those clouds and turn it into a bunny or into a scene or an emotion. And so I was like, I want this thing to imagine. I want it to paint what it sees in the clouds, and that's why it's called Cloud Painter. And it started as a simple tool to help me with time, because I had my first child, Dante, and he was I was becoming more and more involved in his life and wanting to spend my time with him instead of behind a computer. And then and all of a sudden I find myself going without painting for a week, which I'd never done before. And I was like, I need something. I need help. And I was like, and I just thought to myself, it'd be cool if I had a machine that would do most of the painting for me. And then after I got Dante to bed and I was doing my night things, I could go and do the finishing touch-ups. And so it started off as something that just helped me out. But then, after I made my first painting robots that would just like, basically they were printers with paintbrushes. I was like, what? I wonder if it could help me on the contrast, because sometimes I come back to this and the contrast is horrible. And that was a really simple algorithm. And then the algorithms got more complex. I would draw with my children, and I would notice they have this thing where they will fill a piece of paper up with images, and they see a blank space, they fill it up. And I was like, that's creative. And I bet I can make my robots be that creative. It's a lower order creativity, it's not like writing an opera but it's like, to me, I was like, that's a small piece of creativity. Let me see if I can add to my robot. So I added to my robot, fill in empty areas of the canvases. And I put a camera on my robot so my robot could see what it was painting. And then things from there just spiraled every couple months, 16 years now. Every couple months, I'd add another algorithm. And now Cloud Painter is this network of more than 24 AI algorithms, everything from something that tracks simple contrast to another that turns an image in its memory into a color palette, to 3 or 4 deep learning big neural nets that do style transfer, generative adversarial networks that imagine faces. So it's and to sum it up, that's what I think the creative mind is. I think that an artist, what this robot does is it has a camera, it makes some marks, takes a step back, takes a picture, runs the 24 algorithms, to, how do I say it? Decide what to do next with a brush stroke, and then it paints. So, and if you imagine a painter, when I paint my own art, I put a canvas in front of me. I start off with an idea. I put a couple brush strokes down. I take a step back, see what they did, and that takes me in another direction, or it takes me in the same direction of doing more. It's this creative feedback loop that Paul Klee once spoke of. make a mark,
Yeah.
take a step back, and make another mark. The an artistic process, and that's what I've tried to turn my robot into.
And what does it mean to, like, how have the robots impacted like your creative practice, and maybe also the other way around, like how have you, impacted like the way that they work, I guess.
It's made me think something that's a little controversial. When I bring this up, it gets some people upset. I think that I've become convinced that all art is generative art. And I'll use the example of Jackson Pollock. Jackson Pollock has he makes paintings, drip paintings, right? But it's an algorithm, and it's his generative algorithm. I'm going to take some white paint, drip it on a canvas until it's evenly coated. I'm going to take some black paint, drip it on a canvas till it's evenly coated. Then I'm going to go back in with white and black, and I'm going to do it 6 or 7 layers until something tells me to stop. But to me, that's an algorithm, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
generative algorithm just being executed by a biochemical neural net as opposed to a silicone neural net. And when you say that, you trigger some emotions among other artists, and I do get hate mail. And I get hate mail even though I'm careful not to ever say that these machines are artists. But it's just things like everything for me now. I've realized as I'm able to, like, one after another, I'm able to add more and more creative functionality to this machine. The only thing it can't do right now, that I'm not going to say anything like that because it might be. It can do a lot of amazing things, and they're all creative, and it can paint in its own style. Like right now, it has style transfer neural net, so it's developed a style, and it keeps on repeating that style, and I think that's interesting. It has a recognizable style. Um, it can imagine faces. It's something it couldn't do before, and to repeat Harold Cohen used to think that everyone worked from photos. Machines don't work from photos anymore. They can actually imagine. And I often, my recent series is with the noun GANs. It's like, in GANs in general, I love GANs because, like, there's this moment right before the image appears where it's like static and it's darkness. And when I close my eyes and I think of something, and that image comes into my mind, I wonder if it is something very similar to a generative adversarial network. One of, like, maybe thousands of different algorithms in my mind coming together. And it just makes me wonder. So that's the insight the robot's given to me. It's made me think of my own artistic process as generative.
That's really, really interesting. But do you think that, so you said before when we started the conversation that like robots cannot be, considered like the artists themselves,
Yeah.
like you have to kind of input them. But now, like you mentioned, that they have their own imagination. So how does that work? Like, do you think that like as the robots develop, like, and obviously they get an input from you, but I guess they also have their own kind
Yeah.
of input. So what do you think about that?
Yeah. It makes me, what's funny is, like, in the 50s and 60s, there was all these questions about what is art. And,
Yeah.
someone would put an unpainted canvas on the wall and say, this is art. And we've seen it repeated in the crypto space, with, I think Autonomous Art made Theta. And, it's just a transparent pixel, and that's, is this art? So the question of what is art became kind of trite and boring for about 40 or 50 years, or maybe 60 years, from like the 50s until just recently. But now with all this AI, it's a very interesting question again. And the conclusion I've come to is, and I change this all the time, but the conclusion I've come to is art is anything that is one person communicating to another. Like if my child came and says, hey, check out my art project, took a cupcake and smashed it on the table, that would be art because she told me it was art. And what is this art doing? This art is communicating something. Maybe she was communicating trying to be funny. Maybe she was communicating anger. I don't know. But she was trying to communicate something from one person to another. And so that means that if I follow that definition of art, which I'm not sure, everyone has their own definition. If I follow that definition of art, that means a robot can't be an artist until it has something it wants to tell someone else. And that means it has to be a person, meaning it has to have sentience and it has to have a message. And what I think that's interesting about that is when robot art explodes, it's not going to be appealing to us. It's going to be appealing to other robots. because they're going to be talking about their robotic experiences, their silicone world, their, how interesting they are, and they find themselves in the universe, and they're looking for some kind of connection with other things, and they're going to find it easier to connect with other robots than to connect with us. And there'll be some crossover. There'll be some of our art that robots love, like mine. I'm going to be their favorite. And then there's going to be other art that we see when we look at this robot art, and we're like, wow, look at this. This X431 made this image, and this image is strangely haunting and reminds me of what are we doing in this universe. I can see that, and there might be crossover, but it's going to be a different kind of art. That's my prediction. And art, robot art won't happen until they're sentient. So,
and do you think you kind of briefly touched on this, but obviously, like you said before, like AI has exploded, especially like with blockchain art and I guess crypto art, NFTs, etc.
yeah.
Like, how do you see that? Like, why do you think that is? Is it because it's kind of strictly connected to, blockchain is connected to technology and then like leads to AI? Like, why do you think it's AI art that has exploded rather than, I know generative art has exploded as well, but what do you think is the connection there?
I think that the people that appreciate crypto and the mathematical beauty of it, and they're like forward thinking people. And so, of course, forward-thinking people are interested in AI art and generative art, and so I see those going hand in hand. It just makes sense to me. And also, sometimes the medium that you do something in is very important. So if you're going to do digital art, it's really important that the medium be crypto. It's like no one responded to it before. Or I should say, digital art is. It has to be electronic. It has to be forward-thinking. It has to be high-tech. That just makes it all valid. I'll tell you my struggles. This is interesting. My struggles, even in the early days with Super Rare, is most of my work is just a photo. I mean, like, I have this weird, like everyone loves firsts in the NFT world. I sold the first NFT photos because they were photos of paintings. Um, and what's weird about that is I always felt like I didn't belong. I shouldn't say weird. I always felt like I didn't belong because everyone else is doing these awesome digital animations, flashing screens, taking advantage of the medium. I wasn't taking advantage of the medium. I was hooking my art as it was up to the medium and trying to make the medium fit my art, which is I really struggled with, because that's not how you should do it. You should use the medium that's best for your art. So I should, like, my art's best seen on canvases, on walls, with a robot running in front of it. That's the best way to experience my art, not a digital picture of it. So it just makes sense that AI art, which has no home outside of crypto and digital art, it just is very popular. Same with generative art. It makes perfect sense. So yeah, but it's also, this is, I was telling you the word struggle. This is actually one of the things that took me 3 years to realize. Is when I began as an AI artist, and I tried to make the space fit into my AI art. I tried to make crypto work with my AI art, and I realized it took me 3 years to realize that was the wrong way of going about it, and finally just give in and realize that I was actually a crypto artist, and just go all in crypto art. And some people haven't done that yet, but that's the direction I've gone.
What does that mean? Like, I think this is a really interesting comment. And yeah, like, what does it mean to be a crypto artist?
Okay.
Or what does it mean to you, I guess? Like, how did you make that transition?
I gave up pretense. So like, every artist is pretentious, right? We're throwing our art in front of the world and saying, look at this, it's worth looking at. I think even more pretentious than artists are poets. You write a poem and you're like, look at this, I got something to say. So every artist like that. So I had this pretense, and I had this, I think I'm glad I've dropped it. I had this pretense that I was an AI artist, and it was the highest form of art because it's so forward thinking. And, it's just, I was high on that, and arrogant in a little bit of what am I thinking. And, and so when crypto came along in the early days, like I said, I tried to force crypto to fit my art, because I thought to myself, my art's better than crypto. And I'm going to try and like bring crypto up to my standards. Totally arrogant. And sorry for everyone, that all the other crypto artists, because I I've never found a cooler group of artists. But sorry for thinking that. I was never obnoxious about it, but I just thought that inside. But then the more I got to doing it, the more I realized, there is definitely a very vibrant AI art culture, and it has been for a long time, and it's all in academia. And so whenever you see something being done at the cutting edge of AI, I guarantee you 100% it was done 2 or 3 years ago in academia. They just don't go and broadcast it. You go to an academic conference, you'll see it. If you go onto Twitter, you won't see it until an AI artist picks it up and starts doing it. And the AI artist learned it at that conference. So there's this AI art world that's invisible to the general public because these people just don't even care about showing their art. They don't care about showing their art outside of to other academics that are studying the technical aspects of it. And that's where I was. And I never quite fit in with that academic crowd because they're a lot smarter than me. And I rarely understood what they were doing. I was like one of the artists. I was taking what they were doing and then doing my best to hack it together so my robot could use it. And then getting a lot of help along the way. And so I never really fit into that crowd. But then the more I got into crypto, just the more fun, the more people I found that I liked. I never really made the friendships in the academic crowd, although I have a lot of great colleagues there. I just, never made the friendships where I'd worry about them or like hang out with them outside of AI art space. I just found myself so comfortable in the crypto crowd that I slowly began to realize is like, why am I sticking to this pretense of being an AI artist? You're not an AI artist because you have so much more in common with the crypto artists. And so having so much more in fun with the crypto artists, I just gave up the pretense. There used to be things I would not do because I thought I shouldn't do it. Like I wouldn't do, you'll see my most popular stuff now is I'll do, I'm doing this series on Super about AI imagined CryptoPunks. I would never have done that a year ago because I always thought to myself, CryptoPunks is Larva Labs' IP. I'm not going to touch Larva Labs' IP. But then when you get into the crypto space, you realize it's all about just ripping off each other's work. And I became comfortable with doing that. I won't do more than 3. I think I'm probably not going to do any more. But it's just like it was a paradigm shift of respect other people's IP and only do original stuff to crypto is we're going to riff endlessly on each other's work. That and I just recently made this, like, for the first time ever, I made a nouns, something based off of the nouns that are coming out in 4 days. I love working with other crypto artists and trying to incorporate their style. You can see a Bored Ape behind me. You can see Robness over my shoulder. I just realized that this was the crowd I fit in with. And isn't that what defines you, the crowd that you fit in with? I don't know. So that was the transition.
Yeah.
Artist now I consider. So to sum it up, sorry, Micol. To sum it up, I used to consider myself an AI artist that sold with crypto, and now I consider myself a crypto artist that works with AI.
It's interesting, especially maybe like for some kind of like newer people that are coming in and like hearing this. I think it's a really interesting shift, especially. I think like the IP and the copyrights like is probably one of the most like talked, like or non-talked, but kind of like the big elephant in the room that is pretty important in this space. Like obviously you mentioned like Robness, or I'm thinking like Max Osiris. Like I think they've always pushed that limit really, and that definition of take and make it your own that you're mentioning, which I think is very native to the crypto art in the space in general. So it's interesting that that's like how you kind of shifted your mindset.
No, there were big influences on me, and we'd have conversations on the side, and I would call them out. This is what's so awesome about them. I'd call them out. I was like, listen, yes. We'd have like these really cool back and forths, and they've convinced me to change my views on a lot of things. And so it's kind of fun to like go into that like back and forth with other crypto artists and explore that. There's a lot of stuff. I'm always curious what do you think. So IP is definitely one of the weird like elephants in the room. What are the other ones? There's one other one that I'm always worried about, and I haven't stepped over the threshold yet. But I'm curious, like, what do you think the other controversial issues are?
I'm not sure. I think you mentioned something that is very interesting, which is like build for the, like make sure that you're not just kind of, posting your art on the blockchain,
Yeah,
but
you have to
like
get more. Yeah,
actually like innovating
yeah,
the tech, right? Like
mhm,
pushing the tech. I
yeah.
think that's, I guess, also, I don't know if it's an elephant in the room, but it's definitely an interesting view that some artists take and others maybe don't. Um, but maybe I'll ask you, like, when did you, like, what does that mean to you to like push that medium, like to build for the medium and not just, use the medium as a way to showcase your art,
Yeah.
I
Oh,
guess.
that's a great question. I think, and I'm not sure about this, if the only reason you're making NFTs is to sell, I think that's the wrong reason to use NFTs. Like, for example, let's say you're a charcoal drawer that makes charcoal drawings, and you do what I did in the beginning. I was wrong in the beginning. Take photos of my painting robots and make them NFTs. I was just trying to find a larger audience, and I did not find peace with that. And I think that if that's the only reason you're doing it, stick to having your drawings in drawing format. If there's not a specific reason, whether it's the subject, a lot of artists will paint a picture of a Bitcoin and then make an NFT about it. Okay, that's appropriate, because But if you're doing a traditional, landscape, and then you're taking a photo of it and making an NFT, the question I would ask is why? Why would you do that? Does the NFT add or take away? And the medium is very important. I'm reminded of this. I don't remember the artist. It was so long ago, but I remember going into a art gallery and seeing a dozen busts, just busts, and it was a self-portrait of the artist. And 6 of the busts were in chocolate, and 6 of the busts were in soap. And I didn't understand it at first, and then I started talking to people when I realized it. And this was a portrait about self-image, and just the unrealistic expectations of beauty that's put upon her, while at the same time, she's not allowed to eat too much. And then I thought to myself, there's picking your medium, sculpture made in chocolate and sculpture made in soap, and making your medium a part of the art. Everything has to make sense in the art, and I think it's the same with NFTs. If you're using an NFT, the NFT has to make sense to why um, the art is an NFT. And if you look at my history of my art, there's one thing I resisted in the beginning, and this was trying to be true to myself, and I knew, and I just couldn't do it, and I still haven't done it actually, although I've done other things. Is I knew I could sell massive amounts of art if I would do put a Bitcoin, for example, an image of Bitcoin or Ethereum. But I felt to myself, that's not what I paint. I paint AI art. Sneaking Ethereum into it doesn't make sense. People, I don't know how many portraits of Vitalik I've been commissioned for. But I can't do that either because I don't have Vitalik's permission, and it doesn't have to do with AI art. And so this is like this. It's just this interesting thing. It's like everything has to line up. Everything has to be perfect, from the message to the medium to the audio. Everything has to just line up. And I guess it's a long rambling answer, but yeah, I would
No.
suggest. I see a lot of projects where people are like, we're going to bring this to NFTs. I say, unless there's a reason, I don't know why you would. And the reason has to be more than just to make sales.
What would be the reason, or some
Uh,
reasons?
some good reasons is you're making a commentary on the blockchain, crypto, like anything that Max Osiris from Robinus do, for example. We're just talking about them. Uh, or if you're making, or if you're making, now that I say those two, if you're making a statement on crypto culture, which is definitely, there's this crypto culture that goes beyond just the cryptocurrency, and it's totally
100%.
appropriate. If you want to make anonymous work, and you love making, you love being an anonymous artist, that makes sense, because how else is an anonymous artist supposed to make? There's a good example. How else is an anonymous artist supposed to have a career without crypto? So that's another example of good reason. Um, if you just enjoy the community, or if you're forward thinking and you think that the world's going to change and we're going to have a life in the digital world, as well as this physical world outside, that's a good reason to go into crypto and start amassing wealth and property there, just to experiment, see what it's like. That's such a good question. I have 1,000 answers. Uh, if you if you have I love my museum, my meta gallery. I have one in Somnium Space, and one in Crypto Voxels. Man, if you I just like, I don't know if this is why you would get it and put crypto art out, but I just love collecting crypto art. because I like to put it up in my gallery, and never thought it would be that fun. Um, yeah.
Uh,
So you see why I'm not an AI artist anymore. I spend more time thinking about crypto than I think about AI.
yeah, it's really interesting everything you're saying. I had one of the one of the recently like the residency program, there was Art Gnome, that was Jason, that was speaking to
Yeah.
the newer artists, and he said something that I think just made me think about this now. He was like, if you're a traditional artist that is just kind of putting artwork on the blockchain, like think about how you can push yourself to change the way that you're doing art for the medium, like whether it's digitalizing your work, like use maybe like learn some new skills that will allow for this art to be have a meaning, right, on the blockchain. And yeah, it just made me think about that, because it's actually very true.
Mhm.
And yeah, I guess it is a bit of an elephant in the room. I think we see more of you know like less of pushing the medium and more of just utilizing the medium.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm seeing a push to that as well. And we can talk about an interesting one. I don't know where I stand yet on photography, because I think it's awesome. Finally, photographers are getting respect. So in
Yeah.
and of itself, that is the perfect use of the medium, because they're going to get all the advantages of being able to fearlessly share their digital creations. And so I was like, that's enough for me. That's enough. Um, but it is this example of they're not changing anything. They're just taking their digital files and making them NFTs. So that's
It's
where I stand.
interesting.
That's right on the edge, right on the edge. But I think on the good side of the edge, I think on the beautiful side of the edge, that I think a lot of people take advantage of photographers. A lot of people, like I have so many of my photographer friends who are just so disheartened by how much they're asked to do for free, and finally there's something that's going to give them some respect. So I'm looking forward to that expanding. But anything short of photography, like a photo, like me, I'm gonna blame myself. My early paintings, where I was taking a photo of paintings, were not good. Uh, you know what? Maybe they were, because it was like the 100th token on Super Rare, and no one was doing it back then. But there's no reason you should be doing that now. And so I'm so sorry if there's an artist I've offended with that. I'll say what Art Gnome does. Push yourself. Push yourself to add something, to have maybe put an AR or VR. I'm sorry, like an AR code, so you can look at a piece of your painting in VR or something, or add a little tech to it, a little tech, and you're good.
You mentioned a lot of things that I think are very like native to the space, the metaverse, the virtual land, building your own gallery, collecting, like it's also it's pretty much how it all started. Like you said it before at the start, when you got into super rare, it was only what, you're the 13th artist, right? Is it
Yeah,
the
somewhere
13th?
around there.
Yeah. So I guess, talking from as well for a few of the artists, like it was just artists collecting artists. So
And
that
trading.
kind of start trading. Yeah,
We
exactly.
trade, and then when we didn't trade, it'd be like $50. And but it was so sweet, because if you spent $50 on something, an hour later, someone would buy, the artist would have bought your thing for $50. So the way to make sales was to, so it was kind of fun. It was really fun.
And when you talk about collecting, like I know you've just or recently kind of committed to split all of the royalties
Yeah,
uh,
I
with
love it.
all of your owners of the NFT. Let's talk about that a bit. Like how did that come about?
This is interesting, because I'm very cautious about this one. I thought about it long and hard, and then Super Rare did it. And I heard about the idea first of all from Super Rare Rose's Zach Yanger. I was like, that's a great idea. And the reason I actually thought it was a great idea is self-interest, because I have so many early works from Super Rare. I would love it if I was getting a piece of them when they sold, because they're selling in the millions now. So I'd love it if there was a collector royalty on that, and I would just get like a 0.1%. So total self-interest. But more than that, it's like I struggle. I'm going to talk about myself a little. I've been talking to myself for an hour now. I struggle to like share my art with as much people as possible, and the whole experience, and every one of your collectors is basically a champion for you. So I want them to be as successful as me, just to encourage more collectors to come in. And so when I saw Super Rare giving 1%, I was like, you know what? I'm going to split the other 10%. I'm going to split my 10% evenly, as long as Super Rare does it and tests it out, because Super Rare will have a mechanism that I'll mimic. I want, if my work is selling for a lot in the future, I want you to have a piece of it because you were the first person to buy it. I just love that. And then and I just think it goes to the whole ethos of crypto art, is that, you know, everyone is this big circular community where everyone's supporting each other. The collectors are as important as the artists. I don't know how many times a collector has bought something that's defined the artist. I mean, look at Token Angels and Matt Kane. You know, that is like this great combination of like where they created a piece of artwork together that's going to be ridiculously influential for the next 100 years. And I just want to foster those kinds of relationships. And yeah, and by the way, I want to emphasize it's only for super rare work, because I just had this, like, I just put some stuff out on OpenSea, these noun GANs. I made 64 of them, and it would be a nightmare to do the accounting behind them. And yeah, so I can't do it on these big sets I put out. It's just super rare. So.
And when you talk about collectors, I think it's something that also maybe doesn't get talked about a lot. Like I was speaking about it to somebody else, but it's like, you know, collectors are real champions, like in this space. They're as important as artists. Like how has that kind of relationship, how have you fostered like this, you know, your collectors, and also become a collector like yourself? Like how I don't know, maybe like it would be interesting to hear a bit about that.
Yeah, you know, it's the most honest. This is what I love about it. It's the most honest promotion you can give someone, is to buy their work, and therefore it's no surprise that the most influential people in the space are the big collectors. So I can go around shouting all day. Like there's this amazing artist that I've really fallen in love with her work right now. OK Dunn, or Dunn. She goes by Dunn, and she does these gorgeous series of memories and birds. And I just bought 2 of her works from my art gallery. It's one thing for me to say, hey, everyone, check out Dunn. She's awesome. It's another thing for me to say, check out Dunn. She's awesome. I just bought 2 of her works, you know?
Yeah.
And so one makes so much more sense. And just, by the way, go read the descriptions on any of her works. And if you want to find it, just go into the Meta Gallery and you'll find her work, and just go down that rabbit hole. You might lose an hour. So there's this way where collectors can influence, and your vote as a collector matters in proportion to what you spend. And that actually makes sense to me, because anyone can be a promoter and say something's great, but when you put your hard-earned money, like, you know, I'm not a whale by any means, and so I work very hard for all the ETH I get. So when I support an artist, I'm saying I really, really, really like this artist because it took me, you know, a couple days to make this much ETH. I'm putting my time behind my opinion, and I think that's probably why this works. And also, I love that it's so open. I do not know how the traditional art world works, and I tried for years to break into it. And and it just seems so shady. And if you read Jerry Saltz's book, you know, read the chapter names, and it's like all the chapter names are very negative. Like, you know, every gallery's a snake pit is like, you know, beware this collector, and you just see how negative and nefarious it is. But in the crypto world, everything's open. And if you're not comfortable with it being open, go anon, and then you can, like, and you're immune to the bad parts. Totally different. It's like there's no comparison. And I hope it stays that way forever. I've seen a couple galleries try and break in, and I've seen them all fail, and I love it. I love it that they can't succeed in the crypto world.
Do you think it will stay like this?
Yeah. I won't go to a gallery. Everyone I know won't go to a gallery. Every so often I go to a gallery as a favor, and I'm like, oh, why did I do this? And because they put all these like restrictions on you and contracts, and you're like, oh. And yeah. And also it removes. I noticed, like, if I have something being sold for a gallery, it won't sell at that gallery for a while, and then the gallery will give it back, and I'll put it on, and it'll sell in a couple of days. People want that direct connection. They don't want the middleman between you and them. They want to buy it from you, not a gallery.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's also, you know, if you think about like how some of the auction houses work, like I guess one of the fun things about the the crypto space, and I was talking to Coley about it a couple of days ago, it's actually seeing who's bidding on your work, because that
Yeah.
in itself is almost, an art form, like a communicative like art form of seeing, this person who is called X values this much my work, but actually, and it kind of creates, a whole mechanism, a human mechanism in general. And some of the auction houses, I think pretty much all of them don't have that. You can't see who's bidding.
I've noticed
Uh,
that.
yeah. So it's interesting, right? Because it's something that I think artists want and collectors want as well.
Yeah, and there's something I learned about this in art history. The auction houses are also there's like there's reserves, but there's also secret reserves. There's
Mm.
like there's a public reserve. I was surprised when I heard this. There's a public reserve. They'll say this piece is available. Reserve is 100,000, but they'll have a secret handshake with the artist behind the scenes saying the real reserve is 180, right? And that auction house will bid it up to 180. So the artist is never embarrassed that their art only went for 100. And then the auction ends at 180, and that's the headline. But then you look and you see, actually, I saw this happen. Then you look and you see, no one knows that the art didn't sell, but it didn't sell. The artist keeps it or destroys it. Crypto took this away. You see if an piece doesn't sell. And if someone's fake bidding, yes, you can get away with a non-accounts fake bidding and wash trades, but it's harder and you risk your reputation. The auction house like hides that. There was one auction I saw that I saw that the NFT didn't move. I don't remember the exact one, but I remember the auction was won. The NFT did not change wallets. I checked a month later. The NFT had still not changed wallet. And my guess is that's what happened. The reserve wasn't met, but not the artificial reserve for the auction, so that the artist wasn't embarrassed. So it's a realer system. It's a system where you can hide less. It definitely gets me. Every single time I have a drop, I'm scared that I'll be embarrassed or that it won't sell or that I've um, but that's the cool thing about crypto. I don't know. It's one of the coolest things. It's all out there.
Yeah, for sure. And you actually, you were talking about your nouns, GANs, like that you recently released, and
Yeah.
you were saying, I think I saw one of your posts that said, people are asking me why I'm doing them for, was it 001?
Yeah. 0.1. So a couple
Point
hundred.
one, yeah, yeah.
0.1.
So I wanted to expand on that because I think that's also like really interesting. It's like, almost sometimes there's a flip side to the space being so natively crypto, is that it's some artists or artwork might be seen as investment, which essentially it is, but at the same time it's I guess I don't know, I'll ask you. I don't want to give but what do you think about that?
That's the other elephant in the room. Oh my gosh, this is the one thing I will never do to any of my collectors, and I would just beg you, like, first of all, I'll tell why everyone I did. And actually, this is interesting. No, I have very few NFTs. I think they may have doubled. I probably have less than 64 NFTs out there, and they may have doubled with this recent drop. Um, and the challenge for me is, like I told you earlier, about I want to make all my art, native, and a reason. I haven't found a reason yet to make my editions multiple edition. I make a painting on my robot. I haven't found a reason that makes sense other than to sell more, to make a multiple edition artwork. If that makes sense to you. So I don't make multiple edition artworks. I made a couple a long time ago, and I bought them all back, and then burned them. So there's no Van Arman multiple edition artworks. Everything's a one of one. So with this one, I was like, you know what? But that presents a challenge to a crypto artist, because all of a sudden I only have 64 champions, right? I only have 64 collectors that really care about my work enough that they own it. And the other is, you really, when you make your art, I didn't make my art this expensive, but when other collectors make your art so expensive because of the demand for it, that someone that's really into crypto can't afford it, I think, they feel like they're missing out. They're not as fond of your artwork, simply for the reason that it's unattainable. And so I was like, I've always searched. So I have this problem. I don't make multiple edition works. I'd love to, but there's no reason for it. And I want my art to get to as many people as possible, but I only have a way of making like one or two pieces a month. And then this idea came to me, and I wish it came to me 3 years ago, of publishing the training data. So I go through gigabytes of data whenever I make one of the paintings behind my shoulders. GANs make thousands of images. Style transfers make thousands more. I was like, and sometimes they're so beautiful. And this one I was working on one of the paintings, and these were so beautiful. I was like, I wonder what would happen if I just tried to like make this be accessible, and it went crazy. This is actually the Noun GANs, which is on OpenSea right now. It's my most successful art project yet. Uh, in terms of user engagement, collectors, like 4 people are using them as their avatars on Twitter. I love that. That's the ultimate compliment. A challenge of being a portrait artist, which is what I am, is your portraiture only really appeals to the person. Like you're never going to put Sam Bruckman, which is over my shoulder right there. You're not going to put that as you're not going to buy that, like or put it on your Twitter, So that's always been the challenge. It's like it's very focused. And then I just did this, and people really reacted. I'm going to do it again. I think I'm going to do this for every one of my paintings, to make it really accessible. And I'll do 0.1 ETH again. And if that gets too expensive, I'll lower it, just so that there's an even chance for everyone to have this artwork. And there's the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is it gathered a lot of speculators, and a lot of people got upset because it's like they couldn't get it, and all of a sudden it's 4 to 5 ETH right now to get one of those. So first of all, I'm flattered. I love it that you all think so highly of my artwork that you're keeping it, even though people are offering 4 or 5 ETH. I'm really flattered by that, and it's made me, I don't know, it's been really fun for the last couple of days. But I'm going to do it again. And and the flippers. I don't know what I think about the speculators. Maybe I wouldn't mind the speculators if they would just get only one. But there's a couple of people that got 4. There's also, this is the best, and every crypto artist has dealt with this. You get the private message like, I wanted your work forever, man. I never can afford it. And I'm like, please, please, please. And so I set aside 1 for that person, sell it to him for 1 ETH, and then 30 minutes later he sold it for 2. So how can you stop that? But that's just the game. As I guess.
But it's interesting because you like, again, like this is a completely different like way of experimenting, because you've done a project that is allowing a lot of people that maybe cannot afford the one-on-ones to buy into your work and to collect your work, to have it. Obviously there's going to be a percentage of, as you mentioned, like speculators or flippers, which I guess is also maybe the beauty of the space too, like you have those anyways. But it's interesting, like I think there's something that I always like say, it's like just experiment, whether it's like what you're doing or the way that you're creating, but I think that the space is pretty open to do and to experiment, so do that.
Yeah, you know what the funnest part of this project was for me? Actually, it was so fun. Is I love CryptoPunks, obviously. I love Bored Apes. I love them all. Top Dog loves another one of them. And I'm always unsure, why do I love this stuff? And it goes all the way to childhood when I collect cards. And so one thing I really did that was fun, and I'd never see myself doing this as the AI artist 3 years ago, before I got into crypto. And this is where crypto has changed me. Is I made these 64 neural net GANs, and then I looked at them. I was like, you know what? I'm going to give them traits. And so, they have traits. Who does that to their art? Like, there's like properties. They have a color, they have a type, they have a personality, and some traits are rarer than others. Absolutely ridiculous. But we in crypto love it, right? I mean, that's what makes our art. And so, like, I found it was like, I would say this is my most crypto project ever, the funnest I've had in a long time. And it's just like, it's a further of that progression of me as an artist, from an AI artist to a crypto artist. I that should say it all. And I keep on checking them, and I just love it, the people's reaction to them. I'm going to definitely, for everyone, a lot of people are asking, my next robot painting, I'm going to try and do it as appropriate. Every robot painting is going to have a drop like this with probably 64 at 0.1 ETH. I'm in the process of setting up a Discord channel, so it's not a surprise. People have a chance to prep for it. Look forward to that, because I definitely am.
What do you think about like what is something that you mentioned before, like you don't think galleries are going to succeed in the space, or maybe auction houses. Like, what do you think is where the space is going, I guess, or what would you like for it to, like, would you like to say it exactly as it is, or yeah?
I think auction houses will succeed in the space, and I'm hoping, I hope they do. I just don't think galleries will, and I don't know what the difference is when I think about what's the difference between an auction house and a gallery. Uh, but I think auction houses will succeed in the space, but I just think they're going to have to adapt a little, change a couple of their practices to make it easy. But you know what? It might be impossible because one of the things about cryptos is there's laws behind. You have to reveal the identity of the buyers and the bidders. These auction houses use to avoid wash trading and money laundering. Crypto will never go with that. So maybe they'll just be side by side. Auction houses will take care of the more conservative stuff. Super rare sites like Super Rare will take care of the more crypto elements. But galleries, I don't understand their purpose anymore. And I'm sorry, gallerists. Yeah, I don't. They're great curators. So a good gallery is a really good curator because no one has time to look at all the art in the world. So they can continue to curate, but I mean, it's so easy now for the artists to go around them.
Yeah.
I bet they have to change. They're not done, but they probably have to change. It just doesn't make sense to me anymore. I don't know. I always get nervous, Micol, when I say stuff like this because I'm trying. I would love to get into some galleries. There's some galleries I would love to, and they're listening to this and like, oh, this asshole, never gonna work with him again.
No, I think this is funny. This is interesting. But
Yeah.
what about institutions? Like, for example, like the Museum of Crypto Art.
Okay, I put all my spare ETH into Mocha, all of it. It's like I'm staking so much. I think I have like 4% of the pool right now. I think it's the next Louvre. I tell this to Colburn all the time. I think that like once in a while you get the opportunity to be at something like a Harvard or a Louvre or like one of these worldwide institutions that just becomes so culturally significant, but it takes 200 years for them to get culturally significant. I think 100 years from now, Mocha is going to be on par with the Louvre. It's just like a cultural, it's amazing, and everything I hear about them and everything they're planning on doing is amazing. I just love it. It's my favorite project right now. And I'm so influenced by it. Like my museum is completely influenced by Mocha. Everything they do, I was like, oh, can I do that at my museum? And then I realized they do it so well, they must have a team of 100 people. So I just go on. No, I think it's. I'd encourage anyone that wants to like wonder what it would be like to be part of the founding. They're the founders, of course. But be part of the. No, you know what? It's funny. They're so good about it that they're making it so that the generous artists, are sharing in the foundation. And other artists, like even collectors, they have a collectors. If you want to be part of the Mocha as one of the early collectors that has contributed a lot, they have a collectors board. It's a new kind of museum, and it's going to be amazing. And I don't want to. Some of the stuff I've heard from Colburn about what they're going to do. I don't know if he's announced it yet, or so I'm not going to say it. But some of them is just so amazing that I was like, you got to let me be a part of that too. And I think it's going to make. It's going to do a lot of stuff underground for a couple of years until the mainstream realizes how amazing it is, and then I think it's going to go mainstream, and it's going to be one of the biggest cultural institutions in the world.
And what does it mean? Maybe we can close on this question. But you just mentioned founding institutions. Founding members. You're a founding artist, really, of the space. So what does it mean to be that?
It's purely luck for me, though. Like there's artists that are founding artists that really pushed. Like Jason Bailey really pushed. He's like one of the founding people in the space. I have sort of been. I consider myself lucky. I thank you so much for considering me a founding artist, and I love it that people do. But I have so much more indebted. Like I was telling you, I'll make that mea culpa again. I was riding the space for my own self-interest for about a year. Can I make the space fit my AI art? but I owe it to people like Cody, Matt Kane, Zach Yanger, all these other people that actually pushed this space for what it was and made me realize what it was. You know, Robness, Max Osiris, everyone. There's so many. I don't want to name names anymore because then people are gonna. But you know, Angie, Stella Bell. Okay, I gotta stop. There's so many other. I got 20 other names, but if I name them all and then you're not on it, you're gonna be insulted. So, all of you.
You're just gonna all of them.
Most influential people in my life right now, and whenever I see one of the artists, and you know, if I'm talking to you, you know who you are. You really influence my art, change my art, and make my art better. And I would say that, yeah, I'm flattered that people think I'm a founder, but I consider myself a follower in the space of all these other people. And I appreciate them for that. So.
Thank you, Pindar. It was so great to speak. I loved it.
Yeah, and thank you. You included as well. I watched so much of your work. So it's so great for you to get in touch with me and talk with me this morning.
Thanks a lot. It was awesome.
All right, cool.
Cheers.
And thanks everyone for listening to us. Bye-bye.
Yeah.